Hi, I'm Nick Thomas and welcome back to the Academy of Historical Fencing. Today I'm going to be looking at a few new products from Black Fencer. We've had a lot of swords from Black Fencer over the years, hundreds in fact, of both synthetic and steel. And today we're going to be looking at a new model, which is this 1803 infantry sabre, as well as the new blade material that they've been working on, and the new grip material as well, because that's a new option. Well, there are new optional colours and all of them get an upgraded grip. So we're going to be talking about all those different features. So first of all, with their sabres, I've given advice and helped them kind of mould their infantry sabre range over the years to be more and more accurate and realistic to the antiques that I own and others that I've handled, so that they are as realistic as they could absolutely possibly be in terms of weight, handling, and also the style and look of them as well. And ultimately we've ended up with a really great range of training swords, especially the what's called the 1796 infantry sabre in synthetic and steel, but also things like the Spadroon and others as well. Now, let's start with the new model because that's the easy part. The new model is this 1803 sabre. So the blade and the grip are the same as their normal infantry 1796 infantry sabre. I've got one of the old synthetics here. So this is a V5, but it's the sharp simulator blade, so it has the teeth. But you can see that was the sort of, the standard 1796 guard that's been used now for quite a few years. And in the Napoleonic period, these were used by the light cavalry, but they were also used unofficially and then loosely accepted by for infantry officers as well. But in 1803, the British Army got an official regulation hilt for the infantry officers, at least some infantry officers, which are your flank officers, and did get more widely accepted as well on an unofficial basis by a great many line infantry officers. And that is this 1803 Guard. And it's one of my favourite swords ever, not just pattern swords, ever. I absolutely love them, simply because they are an incredibly attractive design, but also very functional. So they are fairly minimalist, and yet they offer quite a bit of hand protection, easy to wear, and they tend to be good fighting swords. So I regularly show antiques of this sword. So this is one of my antiques. I have three 1803s, and I do show a few others that belong to friends over time. And yeah, it is one of my absolute favourite swords. I think it looks good, offers pretty good protection for what it is, and it's just a nice design all around. Now, the blades, the kind of non-regulation stirrup hilt blades that were used by the infantry and the blades used on the 1803 regulation sword are roughly the same, because there was no regulation and each officer bought their own sword, and they had to adhere to rough regulations, which mostly were hilt regulations. But as far as the blade went, with sabres at least, they kind of did what they want. So you'll find quite a range of length, weight and curvature in the blade types, as well as fulled and unfulled blades. So you can find quite a variety. And what I aimed for with the 1796 and the 1803, when I gave specs to Black Fencer, is to go for something roughly typical, roughly average in terms of all of those factors. And that's what we ended up with. And when it comes to the standard 1796, so this is the absolute standard V5 1796, although with the new upgraded blade and upgraded grip. But this is, besides those things, the good old V5 1796 infantry sword. It came out with a weight of about 700 grams, which for a stirrup-hilted infantry sabre of the time is exactly typical. So don't think that that is an underweight sword. It absolutely isn't. The range for these would be historically about 600 to 800 grams. So they're slap bang right in the middle, and the balance is about correct. Again, as an average, because you can find variety, and the curvature is roughly typical as well. So yeah, that's the standard, around about 700 grams. Now, when you put in a guard like this, it obviously adds weight, and this has pushed this example up to 800 grams. In fact, that one that I just showed you was about 720, 725. They do vary a little bit depending on which pommels and things that they use, so they vary slightly. So yeah, you can see it's added that much weight and put it up to 800. What that actually does is actually quite realistic, because say this 1803 here, this is my favourite of the three that I've got. This one weighs 812 grams. So yeah, there's only 12 grams difference between this antique and this training sword in synthetic. And the blade lengths, there's 1 centimetre difference. My antique here is 81 centimetres and this synthetic is 80. But again, you can find such variation in this this type of 1803 sword, ranging from about a 63 centimeter blade up to about an 84. So you can see a massive, massive variation. So again, we aimed for somewhere average, typical, in the middle kind of thing. Okay, so how does it compare? Well, when you've added this much hilt, you've added that much protection. And if you look at, say, my steel version, because this has been on the market for a little while now, so also Black Fencer, and this is their steel version, you can see from the guard on mine, it's had an absolute hammer in, and that is saving a lot of blows going onto the hands. So it's quite surprising the sheer amount of strikes that are saved by this slot hilt construction, especially towards the thumb. So you can see by having this guard over a stirrup makes a massive, absolutely massive difference in the levels of protection being offered, especially to areas that are traditionally vulnerable like the thumb. And okay, in terms of weight, the synthetic is 800 grams, this steel is 799 grams. So yeah, 1 gram difference. It is that close. Now, the balance is a bit further back on this, and that's not so surprising because their steel blades tend to be a whisker heavier than their synthetics, but not much. And the synthetics tend to have slightly heavier pommels because of the way they're constructed versus the steel. So the balance on this one is 13 centimeters, and on this one 11.5. And the originals can range from about 11 to 15. So all still within the realistic range, and it's probably a good thing, I think, going a little bit further back on this one anyway, because this is the synthetic, which is the cheaper, more accessible, generally a bit sort of safer and used by more beginners, but also more experienced fencers as well. So it's good that it hits just that little bit lighter, I think, than the steel. But they're both very, very similar. If you put them in hand, there's a minor, minor difference between these two swords, incredibly close. So they've got the same blade length, same curvature, roughly the same hilt design, and yeah, they're incredibly close to one another. And therefore, unsurprisingly, I would say that Black Fencer have hit the mark bang on with this 1803. And being as it's my favourite sword, and the only option really up till now to buy a steel version is to buy that Black Fencer down there, which is a lovely sword, but obviously a lot more expensive. And what this means is that the 1803, my absolutely beloved sword type, is now more accessible to more people at a lower cost than ever before. So that means you're going to see a lot more of these really sexy slot hilts around, which is awesome, and I really do recommend them. They don't just look good, they do offer that much more protection, particularly to, yeah, the thumb, which is a vulnerability, especially with stirrup hilt swords. So there's the new 1803 hilt. I think they've done a really nice job. And oh, one last detail is you'll notice it's quite nicely rounded here, whereas my steel is the first one they ever made, and it was a lot more squared off, which doesn't look quite so attractive, and they've learned over time and improved, and ultimately what that means is this looks more like the shape of the original, so that's an improvement as well. And we've had a few steels come into the club more recently that they've also done this with, so the steels are also improved again, which does upset me slightly, of course, because it means they're better than mine. So I will have to upgrade mine at some point, but it's one of my favourite training swords to use, so it's going to go on for a little while longer yet before I replace it. Now, onto the other 2 points. So, new blade material, new grip. Let's talk about the grip first, because that's easy. Previously, Black Fencer has only offered one form of grip on their synthetics, which is this kind of brown coloured. And when they're new, they're also really quite harsh to the hand. And they do wear down within a few months of use, but initially they're quite sharp and coarse, particularly if you are drilling without gloves on. But yeah, they do soften down. But anyway, they've now started using this cord material, which is smoother straight out of the box. So it's much nicer on the hand, really quite comfortable from day one. So that's quite a nice bonus. And additionally, they've added different color options. So there are now 4 color options. I believe it is brown, black, red, and maybe dark brown or something like that. Anyway, 4 color options, and you're all going to get this new material which looks a bit nicer and feels a bit nicer. So that's a nice upgrade. Now onto the really big deal here, the blade. So Black Fencer have been developing this blade material for years now. They've been talking to me off and on about it. They've been really excited and enthusiastic to get this done. And it's not just a color change. Now, the color change is certainly a factor. So if we compare these 2 blades, I know this one's a sharp sim, but you can see the color difference. I just couldn't find my normal V5. It's in a bag, squirreled away somewhere. You can see the color difference here. when I put them side by side, the idea is that this grey looks more like steel, which it generally does. It also, because it's got such a matte finish, it doesn't bounce all the light back like the white ones do. So the white ones, they tend to blow out on camera because the light just bounces off them, whereas this clearly absorbs more, and you can get more of the kind of shadowing in the fuller, and I think they look more like steel and they look a lot nicer. And that's quite cool, but I wouldn't necessarily replace all my swords just because they went to a better colour. I think it's an improvement, but what I'm really interested to see is, according to Black Fencer, this new material is chosen because it has less bounce on impact with other synthetic blades and better thrust-in properties, specifically returning straight and true better than the old types. Now, these are brand new. I haven't tested them yet. All I've done is bang them against each other and bang them against some of the old white blades just to see what they're like. And I can tell immediately there is a significant difference. It's obvious. They sound different. They've got a short, sharp sound on impact as opposed to the slightly kind of more thud-in, dull sound of the old white blades. So they do already sound different. And there is a noticeable difference on impact, that they do have less bounce. And bounce is one of the criticisms of synthetic training swords, because after all, these swords are designed to be realistic in terms of weight and handling. They're not underweight, but they do compromise somewhere, and that is they have a little bit of bounce when they engage with one another. And that's more of a problem for some systems and some styles than others. Personally, I find with a curved saber, it's far less of an issue, whereas with some longer and straighter blades, it's more of an issue. But anyway, have we found that? Well, I've got to do some sparring. This is going to need lots and lots of testing, and during these COVID times, things are a bit volatile. I don't know what and where we're going to be able to do, but we will be testing them as best as we possibly can. And I think it's pretty fascinating. They're now moving to all of their training swords being made of this new grey material, so there's no additional cost. It's not an option. It is just the new norm. And through my very brief testing so far, there is definitely a notable, significant, noticeable difference in bounce. There is a reduced bounce. They make a nice crack sound on impact, which is a little bit more like steel as well, of course. And I think they look nice, and I think the grips look more professional. They look a bit nicer, a bit slicker, and they feel nice as well. So personally, for me, I don't know how much it's going to affect things yet because I've got to do more testing, but there is a difference. So it is an upgrade, definitely. It's only a question of how much of an upgrade. And I think they look nicer and better and a bit more like a steel sword as well. So for me, it's just a win on all points because there's no additional cost and they're just better. So that's an awesome upgrade. And that's the general trend with Black Fencer, is they do just continually develop and improve their products as they go. So yeah, you think we're on V5 of these sabers now, and yet they're still getting upgrades. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, I did recently buy in one of each to do some thorough testing of the 1796 and the new 1803. So we can put these against each other and against the white blades, the old standard, and see how they go. But for me, yes, I think they look really good, and I think it's going to be a nice upgrade. And yeah, we'll do some testing. And now, in terms of the thrust issue, I don't know. I think you're going to notice the thrust issues more with some blades that you're going to do more thrusting with, even though you should be thrusting with these sabers. But I think if you did it with, say, long swords and side swords, I think you're going to notice those thrust features a lot more. But I'll have to buy some more in at some point. And once again, I don't have any financial connection to Black Fencer. I give recommendations because I want us all to get the best training swords we can possibly get. And making swords like this and this cheap and accessible is what's driven British military swordsmanship to new highs. So there's the new swords. I will endeavour to get them into sparring footage and do more thorough reviews after testing as soon as I possibly can. And that's it, as soon as I possibly can. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you've got any questions about these, put them in the comments below. But yeah, I think they're pretty cool. And now you can all get an 1803 saber nice and cheaply. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And please do subscribe if you haven't already.